Hello, 101. I am Christiana, I'm Christiana Limniatis, Director of Preservation Services for Preservation Buffalo Niagara. Again, thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight's a little bit different than our normal webinars that we've been doing. All of the webinars we've been doing so far since the pandemic started have been either from one of our homes, from our work from home office, or in our actual office. And tonight we are actually on location at Steve's workshop at Northwood Historic Restoration. So in advance, I want to apologize if we do have any technical blips the rest of the evening. We're kind of hobbling together some technological feats tonight to make tonight possible. I'm hidden here in this office. Steve's out in the other room with all his equipment for the conversations later. So again, apologize if there's any technical blips. As I mentioned in the chat box, we are recording this evening. So if there are any technical issues or you have to step out early, this will be available later on our YouTube channel. Because that we are in a webinar format and there is no way for you to unmute yourself to ask any questions, how you're going to be asking questions, which I hope you will ask questions, is going to be through that Q&A Q&A function at the bottom. So if you're new to Zoom, if you just wiggle your mouse around, you'll see that Q&A button. And you're going to use that for your questions. There is also the chat box that you're more than welcome to use if you have any comments or other statements that you want to share. But if you have actual questions you want me or Steve to answer, make sure to put them in that Q&A section. And with that, I think we will get going. How we're going to divide tonight up is that I'm going to talk to you for a little bit about the importance of your wood windows and why we want to retain, repair those elements in your house opposed to replacing them. And then we're going to hand it off to Steve in the other room to go through the nuts and bolts of how your window works and the different common repair and maintenance tasks that you're going to encounter in fixing and retaining your original wood windows. So let's get started. Preservation Buffalo Niagara, if you are new to us, we are your local preservation advocacy organization. While our main offices are located in the city of Buffalo, our name has Buffalo and Niagara in the title, but we are actually a regional nonprofit. We provide services to the 5 westernmost counties of New York State. So whether you're all the way up in Lockport or down to Jamestown and Olean, we are here to help you in your preservation adventure, whether that is material type preservation, how do you fix your windows, how do you repair things on your house, or preservation planning questions, how do you landmark things, how do you complete historic tax credit paperwork. We are here to help you through all of that. All right, let's just get right into it. Why are wood windows important? True sustainability, as you can see on this chart, is the nexus of society, environment, and the economy. And with that, historic preservation can address each one of those spheres. We can preserve culture, conserve natural resources, and save money. Therefore, historic preservation is inherently a sustainable building practice, the most sustainable building practice. Those principles generally apply to the repair and reuse of our built environment in whole, but it being a sustainable building practice also applies to the individual elements. So it's not just sustainable to keep your whole intact as well. So it's important to keep your wood windows intact. So let's kind of talk about that, all the different ways that retaining your original wood windows is sustainable. We're going to first talk about that society sphere, why keeping your windows is important architecturally speaking, culturally speaking, aesthetically speaking. Windows are the most used historic feature on your home. It's one of the most character defining features on your home, of your exterior and certainly your interior. They reflect the technology and fashion of the era in which your house was built. They impart a sense of character and quality through the way, the wavy glass, if you're so lucky to still have that wavy glass in your windows, or just those handcrafted muttons. It imparts such an amount of character into your home. They impact the way that you view the world, obviously, your ability to see through your windows, and how the world sees your house as well. And then obviously the most functional thing, they provide daylight and ventilation. So they are incredibly important. You can't have a house without windows. It's just not the same. So we want to keep those things. If we look at this picture, it's also important to understand how those incremental changes over time to your windows and certainly your other character defining features on your house ultimately kind of add up and impact your house. And so you can see here, we have 3 sister houses. Originally, they would have all been fairly identical. They've all had a variety of different alterations over the years. And through seeing these 3 sister houses together, you really see that impact that changes to those windows have on that home, that the vision and the impression of how big those window openings are, how tall, how wide they are impacted by whether you keep those original windows, whether you keep those original trim, and so wanting to be mindful of that, and then certainly wanting to avoid becoming the bunker all the way on the right-hand side. So we don't want to completely finding windows. We want to avoid the bunker. Here is another really great photograph showing the impact that replacement windows have on our historic buildings. Don't worry, your mind is not playing tricks on you. This is one singular building that just has a very expertly painted line down the middle, separating these 2 independently owned parts of the same building. When we talk about replacing our historic wood windows, many times that involves not necessarily removing the whole entire window unit, but simply removing the sashes, the window sashes that go up and down, and just popping that new replacement window unit into that opening. When we do that, we are adding extra trim and we're downsizing the amount of glass that you're going to have. So again, you're shifting those proportions of glass, of window opening to building material. And you can see that here in this photograph. On the left-hand side, while not in the best condition, we have all those original windows. And we can see how that glazing, that glass goes all the way to the edge, and it's a big, broad window opening. But when we have those replacement windows, because that replacement material is inside that window opening, we now have less amount of area for that glass. We have a smaller window opening. So that cuts down on your daylight, that impacts your ventilation. Again, another great example of 2 side-by-side windows showing that impact of adding that replacement window that is then smaller than the original opening. You have the original one on the right-hand side. It's been painted white to match that replacement window. But again, you've shrunken down your window opening. You've messed up that rhythm of that architectural detailing of those original windows. Again, windows reflect the technology and fashion of the era in which your building was built. So here we have a commercial structure that traditionally and originally had this end and right over here. Over time, they, if you're not careful with those, and so they were replaced over time, but they were replaced with windows that are typically associated with residential architecture. So again, you can see that rhythm and the continuity of that architectural design is now broken up. You have a mix of traditional commercial style windows that would have naturally been on that building with residential, and it's just all of a mishmash kind of right now. And then here is one last photo, or not one last, one more photo after this. Again, just showing how when we replace our windows with not in-kind replacements that do not mimic that original shape and size and form and texture and qualities of those original windows, it really dramatically negatively impacts that overall architectural design of that property. It's not just about the actual materials of the window itself that we're talking about. It's also the actual glazing, the glass that you're using as well. And so you can see that buildings, how replacing not only the windows, but subbing out glass for different types of glass can impact the overall architecture of your building. On the left-hand side, Maureen's Flower Market, we see that building has what we could assume are the original windows. And it kind of complements that architectural style of that building. The middle building does have replacement windows. They're not terrible replacement windows. I think they're pretty successful shape and size, but they have that high reflective glass in them. So again, it doesn't really mimic those original wood windows. It disrupts that architectural composition that is that building. And then on the other side of it, we have replacement windows that aren't even the same size and shape of the original window openings. Again, not sympathetic to that architectural detailings of that building. Really does mess up that rhythm and composition that that building is. All right, so briefly, the history of windows, right? They are, like I said, important because they are one of the most major, character defining features of your building. They are key to helping to identify the age and style that your building was built. So when we look at the history of windows, in the beginning of windows, they're just going to be openings in walls, and there's not going to be any sort of glass inside of them. They're going to have some sort of shutter to protect the inside from the outside. As we get moving on to time into the 17th century, we're going to have usually casement windows that open up like double doors or like a book, and it's going to usually have leaded glass in those windows. As we get into the 18th century, we're going to start seeing more double hung windows. So you'll have a window with two sashes that one goes up, one goes down, and operating in that way. And those sashes are going to have multiple lights within them. And so you can see that with this picture of the double windows at the bottom, where each sash has multiple panes of glass that are held in by wooden muttons. The reason that we have multiple panes of glass, we have those multiple lights on windows in the 17th and 18th centuries, because glass technology hadn't advanced far enough to really be able to consistently produce high quality, large pieces of glass. So while we can make glass and make big, huge windows, there's lots of cathedrals around the world that would have glass windows in them, but we're not going to have the big continuous sheets that we have today. And so then when we get into the 19th century and the 20th century, again, technology has advanced. So we're going to see more windows that have larger panes of glass. You're going to have larger and taller windows as well, because our architectural styles are going to increase kind of that height of our residential architecture, where earlier architecture is going to be a bit shorter and more stout buildings, but once we get into that Victorian era, we definitely have much taller and steeper houses and roofs. So we'll have taller windows. And so you can see that reflected here on the right-hand side, where we have, instead of a very, very many panes in that window, we're having only 2 panes on the top and 2 panes on the bottom. Quickly going over again the types of windows, the forms of the windows that we have, and I've kind of already talked about them. Most common examples of residential windows are going to be those double hung sashes. So you have a sash on the top, a sash on the bottom, and they both can move in the opposite direction. Many of you probably have double sash windows, but maybe the top sash isn't operable because either it's been painted over so many times that it's stuck, or maybe the sash weights that create that balance for them to move up and down are broken or missing. But even though you have those 2 sashes, it's a double hung window. Casement windows, again, are going to be ones that open up like doorways or like a book. Fixed windows are going to be those decorative windows that do not operate, that do not open, and just have that large decorative panel, usually with leaded or stained glass. And then we have awning and hopper windows that are casement windows just on their sides. So they open up or they open down. Something also to keep in mind is that there is terminology to describe the placement of your windows, right? So if you have a single window that's supported by its own sill, that's a single window. 2 of them together, paired. If you're so lucky to have a row of windows in your stairwell, you might have a set of stepped windows, and then 3 together would be a triple. As I was saying before, how our windows, their shape and size and design helps us identify what the age of the building is and the architectural style. Here are some examples of types of windows, shapes of windows that are emblematic of particular styles. So on the left-hand side, we see circle top and segmented arched windows. Those are typically going to be found in early 1800s, early to mid 1800s buildings, these styles of Italianate and Second Empire, usually going to see those window types there. And then we have on the right-hand side, Gothic or, I'm gonna cough. Gothic or pointed arched windows. Again, you're going to see those in a variety of different architectural styles, but most often with Gothic revival or Tudor revival style homes. When we get into the Victorian era, most associated with the Queen Anne style, you're going to see windows like these. On the left-hand side are cottage windows. So those are going to be windows that are either fixed or with a single sash. The bottom sash is the only one that's operable. And you'll have a large window on the bottom, usually clear glass. And then the top smaller window is going to have usually either leaded glass or stained glass or some other type of decoration in that upper panel. And then on the right-hand side, you can see examples of various decorative Queen Anne double sashes with decorative mutton patterns on the top. Getting into the 1900s, the 19-teens, 1920s, you're going to start seeing that craftsman style influence, that arts and crafts style influence, where you're going to see windows that are typical of these images, where you have that long, a wide single pane of glass on the bottom sash, and then geometric odd numbered panels on the upper sash. And then this last window is just slide is just to talk about how we refer and diagram windows. We use a ratio system to describe windows. So the ratio is going to describe the number of panes of glass, the number of lights that are in the upper sash, and the number of lights that are in the bottom sash. So on the left-hand side, you can see that there are 8 lights on the top, 1 light on the bottom. So that's an 8/1 window. Next to it, 9/1, 6/1, 1/1, 4/1. 6/6. Again, every one of these types of window arrangements that you see in front of you are common in all types of buildings, but each style of architecture is associated commonly with one of those types. So the 6/6, you're going to see 6/6 more often with Federal style or Greek revival style, those earlier architectural styles. And then these ones that have the single light on the bottom, you're going to see in those later architectural styles, because that technology of glass making had advanced that you want bottom. All right, so that's crash course your wood windows. Let's talk about the environmental and economical reasons, financial reasons that you want to repair and retain your historic windows. Because these topics are so intertwined to each other, there's not really one way to just talk about environment, just talk about accounts. Innovation and sustainability is that the greenest building is the one that's already built. What does that speak to? It speaks to the fact that historic buildings contain an amount of what's called embodied energy. So embodied building to manufacture the elements that are used in that building, the energy used to transport those materials to the site, every bit of energy that went into making that building, that is its embodied energy. So when you demolish that building or remove those character defining features that took, all that energy was used to make, you're basically throwing away all of that energy. You're wasting that energy. So even if you are demolishing that building to build a very green, sustainable new construction, you're still in the hole as far as energy consumption. You've already wasted and thrown away all of that embodied energy. So no matter how green that new building is, you're still always going to have to be making up for that loss of energy. And it's not just about the embodied energy that was used to build that and create that building. We also have to think about the energy that's used to demolish and throw away those elements. And a while back, when the project action that's underway now the land was being cleared, they demolished 11 buildings for that new building. All of the energy to just power the the tractor to tear down all of those buildings took up that much energy. That much energy could power an electric car to go around the world 237 times. So again, it's not just about the energy that we want to preserve that was in the embodied energy in the building, but the energy we would use to actually dismantle it as well. Here is a graphic to speak to the importance and sustainability and superiority to traditional materials. So here's an image of two pieces of wood. One is an old growth wood and one is new growth wood. Now, before anyone jumps in to point out that these are actually two different types of wood, the message that they're trying to come across with is still consistent in that older old growth wood is going to be stronger, denser. It's going to be more resistant to rot. It's going to be stronger, denser material. It's going to generally stand up better to termites and other types of critters than that new growth wood is. So again, if you have old growth wood, you have old windows, it's going to be using that old growth wood. So even though it might have some damage over the last 100 years of it being in your house, it's still going to last longer after proper maintenance and repair than any new wood material that you could be using or introducing into your house. That's especially relevant and important to keep in mind when we talk about clad windows. So one of the most common types of replacement windows that people go for are those aluminum or vinyl clad windows, where the window is wood inside, but it's wrapped with that modern material so that you don't have to paint it or take care of, no maintenance on the outside. As you can see, you can have water infiltration in those types of windows around the deterioration of these clad windows. And so because of those lawsuits, the quality of clad windows has definitely increased and improved over the last few years, there is still always going to be a potential for water infiltration into those clad windows. So even though they might be wood, it's not a free ride into avoiding any sort of issues that come with those replacement windows. When we talk about comparing our original wood windows to replacement windows, and Steve is going to make this even more clear when he talks about the window parts and goes through the anatomy and all that jazz, is that original wood windows, your traditional windows, were built to be repaired. They were built purposefully to be dismantled so that you could repair it, do maintenance, put weather stripping if you have extreme weather and you want to keep them a little bit more airtight. Whereas modern replacement windows are not repairable. They are being sold to you as being maintenance free, but that's not true. There is no thing as maintenance free. It just means that it is not repairable. It is a single use item. So for example, these two windows, if you hit a baseball through both of these windows, our friend in the red shirt on the left-hand side with her original wood window is going to be able to easily take out that broken glass and repair it and have a perfectly wonderful functioning window the next day. Whereas our gentleman in the blue shirt on the right-hand side cannot repair that broken window that the baseball went through. He will have to buy a whole new window unit. So again, from a sustainability financial point of view, replacing something that could be repaired and just be a $20 replacement cost with something that you have to pay that full ticket price every single time it breaks, that is not financially or environmentally sustainable option. So not only from a repair point of view, you're never going to kind of make up for that cost of that unit. From an energy saving point of view, you're also never going to make up that energy savings. So, one of the big selling points of replacing your window is that your old windows are drafty. You need these new windows to save money on your energy bill. And as you can see in this chart, even if you are seeing a savings in your bill every month for your heating or cooling bills, when you factor that and compare that to the investment, the amount of money you spent on that windows, you have replacement windows taking upwards of 20, 30, 40, 240 years to be able to get that payback of what you spent on the windows versus what you're saving in your actual energy bills. So again, even if you get the best top of the line windows and see an impact in your energy bills, it's going to take multiple decades to be able to get that payback. And then ironically enough, your window, no matter how good it is probably going to have a warranty or a shelf life of 10, 15, or 20 years. So it's more likely that you'll actually have to replace that window because it's failing in its energy savings before you can even recoup all the money that you spent in that window in the first place. So once you start that replacement cycle, once you remove your original windows, you're just kind of consistently in the hole as far as making up that savings to pay back that investment of that replacement window. Here is another chart that kind of shows that same concept from a different angle. And so it shows the annual % energy savings for various tasks, various ways that you can try to improve your window efficiency. So that light blue column shows that annual percentage of finding that high quality replacement window. So yes, it is, when you look at this chart, the most effective way to save that, create that energy savings. But if you combine adding weather stripping, an exterior storm window, and energy saving interior shades, when you combine all of those three methods together, you're actually going to outperform any of those energy saving replacement windows. And when you analyze the cost of what it costs to put weather stripping, a storm window, and better shades, that's going to definitely be cheaper than any of those replacement windows. So again, looking at the cost value of all of the ways that you can repair and maintain your original wood windows versus just getting rid of them and buying new ones, that money saving is always going to be with the original windows, and you're not going to see that same money saving with that replacement window. And my last thing to say before we hand it off to Steve, is that if your main reason to replace your windows is because of energy reasons, and you're just doing that through replacement windows, you're actually not even addressing the full problem. Because as you can see here, yes, your windows and doors is a major way that you can lose heat in your building, but you can also have heat loss through your roof, through your walls, and through your foundation. So if you have a drafty house and you're like, oh, I got to fix these windows, but you have no insulation in your roof, you have no insulation in your walls, you have a crack in your foundation in your basement, no matter how wonderful of replacement windows you get, you're never actually going to make a serious impact on that heat loss in your building. So instead of running quickly to replace those windows, it's much more cost effective to do a full building energy loss analysis. So you can actually target the parts of your building where you really are seeing those dramatic impacts of heat loss, and not necessarily taking it out on the poor windows because it's the easiest thing and maybe more cheapest option of being able to address that heat loss problem that you have. All right, that is my crash course in the reasons why you want to keep your windows and repair them over replacement. Before I hand it to Steve, I do just want to give a quick shout out that we are going to be having an in-person hands-on window restoration class in July. We have not put this live on our website yet, so you are the first to hear about this program. We're going to be putting this live this coming week, so keep an eye out for that in our newsletter and on our social media. It's going to be a hybrid event. We're going to have a very small number of people who can join us in person to learn directly from Steve. And then we'll have it also live streamed as a webinar so that people can see those skills and learn from Steve that day, and also to learn more from our host that day, which is the Tool Library. So that will be a fun evening for everyone. And with that, I'm going to stop this share and we are going to head over and let Steve talk to us about Windows. If y'all can just be patient with us for 1 second while we finagle this technology switch from me here in this office to Steve out in the lobby. 1 moment, we'll be right with you.
Okay, I think it's going. We're good?
We're good.
Is it broadcasted? Okay, cool. You're on.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to this webinar. So first time I've ever done a webinar, so I apologize in advance if things are a little rough on my end. Usually I have a big audience in front of me or a small audience of actual people in the room. So apologize in advance if I'm a little awkward in it. So I'm not used to talking to a camera. You heard everything that Christy said regarding Windows. My name is Steve Swiat. I'm the owner of Northwood Historic Restoration. Our main business is restoring windows. I've been in business 20 years. A little over 20 years starting restoring windows. We've done them all through New York, downstate New York, New England, New Hampshire. I've been working in a lot of areas out there, so I've seen a lot of windows in my day. So other than the introduction, we'll get right to the windows. I don't know how many of your windows at your house look like this, maybe worse, maybe better, but this is your typical window that we see a lot around in here, basically from the late 1800s. We get into some in the 1850s, 1860s, a lot into the 1900s. But this is out of a home in Buffalo from I think late 1800s, but there was an addition in the 1900s. They changed it over. The only reason this window's out is because they renovations to the house and they needed the window out to have a fall. So they listed as a complete window. This window is actually out of a masonry house. Masonry house windows are a little bit different when you pull them out than wood frame. But for your purposes, it really maintaining a window shouldn't matter at all. There's just a little different construction. So we'll get right into the parts of a window because there's some names to different parts and so forth. This window would be considered a 3/3. You have 3 individual lights over 3 bottom lights. A lot of windows will be 1/1, which is just one piece of glass over one piece of glass. Very common around here, especially around the turn of the century, when big glass means you had a lot of money. If you had small glass, it means you didn't have a lot of money. So big pieces of glass meant usually had quite a fair amount of money. So you see a lot of those in houses in Buffalo around the turn of the century. You'll see 6, a lot of commonness here is a 6/1, where you have 6 lights over 1 line, or you have 6 lights over 6 lights, that would be a 6/6. You don't really see a lot of 12/12s or 12/6s or anything like that. That's more of a New England type. So anyhow, well, enough of that. Just want to make sure that it's 6/6. You'll know what that's about. So we're looking at the exterior of the window, and it's rather weathered. It hasn't been maintained in a long time, but there's certain parts we'll go over. When we say window, these are called the sash. You have the upper sash, the lower sash, SH, SASSH. I'm sorry, yeah, and those are the functioning parts of the window. When you open it, you've got your lower sash goes up, upper sash used to go down a long time ago, but what happens, we'll cover later, it gets painted in and never gets used. There was a reason the lower sash was operable, or the upper sash was operable. But we'll cover that a little bit later when doing the name. So these are your sash, the operable part. This is called your sill. The window sill is the bottom. Often you'll run into rot in your windowsill, or it's been weather checked if it hasn't been maintained. The other parts we have is something referred to the blind stop, which holds your upper sash from just falling out. It's a piece of wood that is mounted into the frame of the window, the frame being the whole window unit, and that keeps really the upper sash from falling out. The reason it's referred to as a blind stop is a long time ago, early in the 18th century and so forth, they didn't refer shutters as shutters, they call them blinds. So what that would essentially do is when you closed your shutter, or blind as they called it back a long time ago, it would stop the blind from going in further. The only reason it's called the blind stop. You could actually probably call it the shutter stop, which would make more sense nowadays. And then around it, you'll have either a trim of a brick mold, and there's a window down there, the wood frame, which it would be casing on this window. This is a 3/1. Used to be 3 lights over a single, and that's a casing, where this is a brick mold. So that's really the exterior components of the window. We'll spin it around. And once again, you see your sash. This was a higher quality window out of a very high-end home in Buffalo. Often you won't always see these little horns on the top of it, either referred to as horns right here or lugs. This one has it both on the bottom sash and lower upper sash. Those actually, besides looking, pretty with the design and kind of adding a little flair to the window, really made the window a sturdier window because it gave the joinery in here better support. So this was a high-end window, and it's, it was back from 1895, and it's still around today. The rest of the windows are still in the house, intact, being restored. Okay, so we have our sash. This is your sash lock. Pretty simple. Most will have one, sometimes we'll have two, but sash lock. Okay, we got our lift handles, which when these get stripped off, they're a beautiful brass handle. Most of your handles are going to be very nice once you get that paint off of it. Same with the sash lock. Often they're brass and higher quality windows. And over the years, somebody gets a little paint on it, and then somebody gets a little more paint on it, and then somebody just said, I'm just painting over it because I can't remove it. These are removable. There's usually little screws that take them out. You can throw them in a crock pot, let the paint come off, and then polish them up, and they're nice, usually nice brass. Okay, on that we have the part that holds in the window is called your interior stop. That keeps the lower sash from falling out. If you didn't have that, it would be all over the place. In here, there's also something called either a parting stop or a parting bead. It's this piece of wood that separates the two windows. Parting, P-A-R-T-I-N-G, so that keeps the windows, it parts them. That's all it really does. Window components, the sash components are bottom rail, top rail, meeting rail. The upper sash would have a meeting rail and then a top rail. These are referred to as muttons. A lot of people call them mullions, but they're really not. They're muttons, M-U-N-T-I-N-S. Mullions are when you have windows put together, the middle is a mullion. So that's a mullion for windows. And then we have our glass, which is self-explanatory, and our pulleys up here. Each sash should have one, and then the sash cord. So those are really your components of your basic double hung window. We're not going to cover casement windows. In this one, we're going to cover, the double hung. So that's and then you have interior casing. The part that is missing on this window, there's a piece of wood that comes out here. Often people call that the sill. It's not the window sill. That's actually the window stool. The sill's on the outside, the stool's on the inside. So that's just one of those things that's often called a sill, but the sill's really to the outside. So those are your window parts. Okay. Okay, so like Christy was saying, the great thing about the old windows is they were really meant to be maintained. These were made, no one was thinking about, okay, we'll put these windows in 10 years, we're going to throw them out and get new windows. The old windows were probably pre-1940 were traditionally built windows, even to the point where when this window unit might have come in, or a lot of them, even into the 1920s, the carpenters would come in and put the frame in of the window, and then you'd have a millwork shop make the actual sash. Those would go in separate. There's actually a pretty neat video out there which shows a brick house being made and the frame going in first, and then a sash, the carpenters put the sash in, and then actually a glazing trade would come in and put the glass in, and then a painting trade would come and paint the windows. So it really was a traditionally built window, which this was. I don't know if this is made as one unit or it went in as separate. As opposed to after World War II, when we had to build a lot of houses quickly, they started making windows more as a product, where it was made in a whole unit and put in. And as time went on, it became more and more of a product, so it became less and less maintainable. And like it was said before, I mean, really low maintenance means you don't fix it, you just replace it. You're not maintaining it. So old old windows were really designed to be maintained. No one thought about throwing it out. So that's why they've been around so long, because they can be maintained. And we got away from it after a while when the product windows came out. But prior to that, no one would think twice about, there was carpenters hand laymen, homeowners who adjusted the sash cord went, they go down to the hardware store and get sash cord and replace the sash cord. So with that, the windows generally come out, the lower sash usually comes out somewhat easy, but I don't want to say easy. Depends if it's weather stripped and depends if it's painted in. But the way it's taken out is the interior stop will unscrew. Sometimes there's screws and washers holding it. Sometimes it's just nailed on. This one has screws and washers that have been painted over. That the slot that the screwdriver goes in gets filled with paint. So you take your screwdriver, put it in the slot, tapping the paint. And this one was pre-done just to save a little time. But the screws will come out. Or else it's nailed in and you have to pry away the nails. Prior to doing, if you take the screws out, this one's already been loosened up for demonstration. All right, you're going to want to take a utility knife. You're going to want to score the paint line here or caulk line. That'll help prevent when you pull it off, if there's paint, it'll reduce the chance of breaking paint away from the different things. So you kind of run it down there, but this piece actually comes off either with nails or screws. So that's how you get the stops off. This one's out. If the window isn't weather stripped, and I don't know if this one, you can actually pull a window out, especially if the sash cord is broken, with only taking one stop out. So if my sash cord, you don't always have to take off both stops. So you can get it out and take the window out. Say we have broken glass and we want to fix the glass or we want to restore it. You can pull out the window this way, or you can pull off both stops. And you'll see the sash cord coming through. It's an old sash cord. There's a knot here, and they also put a screw in to help hold that knot. Often you have to do that just to hold it together. So we'll just go with the low sash, and you can pull this screw out. You get that? Most of the time you'll be doing this because your sash cord is actually broken. You're not even gonna have to deal with this. What if we needed to replace glass? And the big problem I see out when we're working out there are people inquiring of my services, which we work on a lot of historic buildings and large projects. Somebody has a piece of broken glass and they have to replace it, and the glass shops don't want to run out, especially for a second floor window. They don't want to run out for pretty much any window, understandably, and replace the glass. So you have to get the glass in to yourself. So this is the way the window comes out to get the glass. If you have to take it into, a shop for them to replace the glass, or you want to try it yourself. So that's how the windows come apart. But they do, they are meant to come apart and also be re-roped. I'll pull out the screw real quick on the other side. We'll get the sash out. There's often, not besides screws, sometimes the knot's just in there. Sometimes it's nailed in. Sometimes drywall screws are put in. I do not recommend when you put the window sash back, putting a screw through the actual sash cord, because you're going to tear away at the fibers. And then it's going to weaken the sash cord, and it might only last you a short time. So you're better off pushing a nail through and hammering it, a short nail, not a long nail. But here's the sash out. You can see it wasn't any real strenuous thing. You can then take it, restore it yourself. Take it to the glass shop, whatever you have to do. The sash cord runs down through this sash groove here, and that's where your knot hole would go. So there's different configurations you'll see, but that's how it's attached. It's not anything really tricky. Unlike a new window with spring mechanisms and so forth. It's really pretty straightforward. So that's how you remove a window, lower sash. Now, often the top sash gets really tricky. And that's when I can just kind of go over how it's done. But this is going to be the most problemsome because often you're going to find the sash, upper sash is painted in. Sometimes it's painted in that it's not even closed all the way and it's down a little and your meeting rails aren't lining up. So that's a more difficult one to get out. This one gets a little tricky, but it's possible. The parting bead here has to be removed, which I won't do for this. The parting stop, parting bead has to come out. And often it's painted up pretty well, even that. So somehow you have to break the paint bond down. There's different ways of doing with a knife or anything and getting that out. The problem what you'll find is even if you get all that paint broken, the sash is stuck and you can't get it down because the sash has to be low really to get the parting bead out. If you can get your sash to move, it's usually painted. Take a utility knife or any type of tool, multi-tool or something. If you can get that paint bond broken on both the outside and inside, you might be able to start lowering the sash down to the point where it's all the way down, which then makes this removable easier. If you can't get that out, the best way to do is just get the parting bead out of there and get a new parting bead, which is splitting it off the top, taking it out, and removing the parting beads altogether to get that upper sash. It's not the fault of the window. It's not the fault of the design of the window. It's really to blame the window saying, oh, well, that's too much work and everything. Really, it's the fault of painting it over the generations of too much paint buildup on the window that the paint killed the window. The window didn't destruct itself. It's really the paint, that too many layers of paint. So that's how you get that out. Your weights for, if you have to retie your cords, let's go inside. There's a weight pocket here, and there's screws that take out, screws or nails that have to take out. Look at this one out. Well, I don't know if I want to fumble it for it. You know, there are screws here, which that'll take out your weight pocket. Of course, this tool. So as you can see, a lot of it was designed to be taken apart. There's actually screws in here to access the weight, so it's not nailed or glued shut like a new window would be. It's going to come out a little hard because it's sitting on. So this is your weight pocket cover. That here's your weight. That's your weight to the. And these are really high-end windows because it's probably hard to see. And if you have these in a window, this is actually a wood divider that they put between the weights for the upper sash. Now, you can see. Here's the weight for your upper sash. This is a wood divider. If your window has this, it's a really high-end window. This little wood strip, not all have them, was meant when you open the windows and close them, you wouldn't hear the weights clinking together. So when you see those in your window, you know when your window was built, it was it's this wood strip right in here. And it divides the two weights. Here's your upper sash weight. Here's the wood strip, and here's your lower sash. So if you open your windows and you see those, it's a really high-end window, top-notch window. So that's how you get a window apart. I'm kind of going the short version of it, and when we go to the, we can bring this to the next window workshop, and we'll go through that, so it's easier to see in person. But as you can see, it's all been built to maintain. There's nothing I have to, plastic parts I have to break off, or things I don't have to run anywhere. If the weight pocket's no good, somebody with basic wood experience can make a new one, put it on. I don't have to order any parts. So that's really the window, how it comes apart. Now, if you're going to restore your window, we do it all the time. We paint it over the years. Paint keeps dripping down on it and so forth as it gets painted. The paint can be removed. There's ways of removing the glass without breaking it. We can discuss that in further workshops. We have a professional steam box. You can make a small pour boy steam box, pull boy, and something, a way of, we do it with a big professional steam box here, but can be something you could build at home. On the cheap, not a lot of money involved. And that for a whole set of windows in a house can probably get away with one steam box before it kind of starts disintegrating. The rest of it, what we do is we use heat guns and scrapers. Once we have the glass out, we use heat guns and scrapers to get the rest of the paint off. And then goes to a sanding process. Basically, different types of sandpaper, hand sandpaper. Usually go at 60 grit, 80 grit, and that's it. If it's a natural finish, we'll probably take it up to 150, but that's another subject. The warning I'm going to give is, if you're restoring your windows, they're probably lead paint. I don't think. I assume all windows have lead paint on them, which if that's the case, there's safety precautions you have to take, which you probably should read up on, and get respirators, the proper respirators, masks and so forth. So that's something that you have to take caution of. You don't want to give a ton of exposure to it. A little's probably not going to be the end of the world, but you don't want to be getting a lot of exposure to lead. You don't really want any, but so that's something just cautious when you do.
I'm going to interrupt you to ask
Please
a
do.
question because it has to do with what you just talked about.
Okay.
Do all window stops have, you don't have to put it on me. Do all window stops have screws in them?
No, unfortunately not. Many are just finished nailed on. And so when you take your knife and cut the paint bond, you just have to get a flat knife in there. It's kind of work it away. So have been nailed on with somebody who must have had stock in a nail company, because there should be maybe 4 or 5 nails, maybe a tall window, 6 nails. Some you'll pull off, and they use roofing nails. They use every nail, so it's kind of brutal that way. And you might break a stop, and you'll have to replace it. Somebody kind of got carried away. We find them all the time, but there's more nails than I think you can even imagine to get them off. So yeah, to answer the question, often they're nailed on. It's nice when they have screws on it, but and the screws were actually put there to maintain it. And a higher quality window might have screws there too. They're all maintainable, but that's why, because they knew we have to make this window design so it can be maintained. They just didn't put screws there because it was, they had stock in the screw company. The other thing is, some of the screws, they made the hole on the stop larger so you could adjust it seasonally. And people did that, believe it or not. Winter came, they loosened the screws, they pushed the stop, it wasn't caught or anything, they pushed it and made that window real tight so it didn't rattle. And then summer, when it swelled up, they loosened it up. They were meant to be adjusted.
Passive heating and cooling methods.
Back then, they didn't have as many distractions like social social media or webinars, so they could spend all day.
Second question
Sure.
is clarification. Is this window stop the same as the jam?
No,
No.
no. Good point. I did not name the jam. And Greg, I'm gonna backtrack a little. That was a good point. I mentioned when they say the window frame, that's the whole frame. That includes the sill, the jam, everything that's in the frame. So I would call this the window frame. The jam, I forgot, is J-A-M-B, not to be confused with J-A-M, is the part. This would be the side jam with the weight pockets in it, and then the head jam. So if you see the word jam, it is actually the side of the window. And then so altogether it's the window frame, but it's the sill, jam, parting bead, blind stop, casing, brick mold, but not a ton of things. And a lot of them won't affect what you're doing. Okay, so I don't know if I did this out, but the parting bead, you can see if you bring it now that we got the weight pocket out, you'll see the parting bead is a separate component. I won't get it out now because of the product, but it's a separate piece. It is, sometimes there'll be a nail in there. Somebody might have nailed it because it wasn't sticking in well. Usually they're just a press fit. It should just be a press fit. Once again, maintainable, because if they nailed them, then you couldn't get them out, or put screws in, it might be harder to get out. The problem with parting beads not coming out easily is, once again, not the fault of the design of the window, the fault of being painted over so many times. It's just, it'd be like painting a door so much that it's stuck shut. So a lot of things is that the problems were caused by overpainting, even to the point of the pulleys being painted and the sash cores being painted. It takes time to paint a window. It's really not that hard. When I paint a window with the sash in, I'll grab the sash cord with one hand and kind of pull it out of the way and paint behind it. We got the window out, so I don't have any tension on it. So if you're ever painting with new sash cord, just pull the sash cord away and paint behind it carefully and let the sash cord go. Most of the time, it just got painted over the sash cord, and then the pulley got painted, and then the window doesn't work at all. So the killer of most old windows is paint, over painting. In fact, if you go up to New England a lot, you'll see that the jam was never even painted. The tracks that the windows run in on the jam were natural wood, and they still kept them. They might have oiled this to protect it, and the parting bead will come right out. But then people start getting paint over everything, and then you just keep painting and painting until it's kind of killed. So that's the windows. Going over that again. Okay, so there are ways of, we can remove paint and talk about which parts of the window to paint. If you take your window out and you do some restoration, this is the lower sash, paint all parts, do not paint the sides of the window. All that's going to do is cause gumming up as it heats. So we never want to paint. This is bottom rail is not painted for some reason. Generally, it's best to have them painted just to protect, because this is an area that gets wet. It's best to paint this. And you can see this is a high quality window real quick. It's got mortise and tenon joinery that is actually wedged. The mortise and tenon is a very strong joint. There's a sample here. This is a window joint. This is your tenon, this is your mortise. When these windows were built, it was built like this. That was put in through here. It wasn't glued, it was just pinned. Older windows will have wood pins, and wood pins went on for a while. If you can see, there's wood pins right here. Those are wood pins that just held the window together. There's no glue. In fact, you can see one starting to make its way out here over time, just from expansion and contraction. That's a wood pin.
Just to go back to what you were saying about not painting and I wrote that in the chat to everybody, not to paint the parts that are going to rub against each other. You were saying you could put oil on it. What type of oil? Linseed oil?
Well, I actually probably wouldn't oil those either. Okay. But I was saying I would oil, like if your jam tracks are clear and you don't want to paint them, then you want to give some type of preservative to the jam track where it goes, if you want to build up a paint. I usually don't do any treatment to the sides because I don't want anything causing stickiness. When we put them in, we'll often use like a paraffin wax or some type of wax to get the windows to glide better, but you want to avoid anything that's going to create the window to stick. All right, so if we want to get into paint removal, that's a whole big subject. If you're going to try it, just be careful, lead, don't breathe it all in. You want to keep your lead levels low. Okay, so then there's weather stripping. That's a whole other subject, but this window is not weather strip. Sometimes when you're pulling your window apart, you're going to find a zinc weather stripping. Just kind of neat up. This is a newer piece. There's a groove cut in the side of the window, and this weather stripping, sometimes we refer to as interlocking weather stripping, goes in that groove. It also goes on the side of, so when the window goes in, it's on the side of the jamb, and then the window rides up through here. So when the air blows through around here, it slows it down. Every time you make a curve that wind has to go around, it slows it down. So that will be you're going to find quite a few windows around Buffalo where this exists, and those are a little trickier to get out. There's ways of getting out. I don't know if I could cover it this way, but that makes it a little trickier to get out. But you can get it out. You can reuse the weather stripping if it's in decent condition. It might be 100 years old. Clean it up, it's fine. A lot of windows were weather stripped from the beginning. Probably after the turn of the century, into the 1920s, there were actually companies, quite a few, who would come by and they would go in and weather strip all your windows. They would retrofit your windows with zinc weather stripping. So that was a business quite a long time ago. There's other, right? So you can replace this weather stripping, it's still available for brands. So it's a little tricky and it's a little probably past what we can cover now, but it is possible to work even with the weather stripping. And then, there's other ways you can replace that. And then there's other ways of, a cushion type bronze weather stripping, which can be retrofit into your windows if they don't have any weather stripping, or if you don't want to use the zinc interlocking weather stripping, you can go to something like this. So it's a little, like I said, it's probably more for a whole workshop on weather stripping. But just to say, windows can be weather stripped, and even we cut, different type of silicone bulb materials into the bottom rail, the top rail, the median rail. We can router in, and there's different type of bulb weather strippings which we can use. So those are something that's out there to block the airflow and stop air infiltration. Okay, now you've got your window, and it's only single glazed. When I say single glazed, it's one piece of glass. It's not insulated glass, which is actually two pieces of glass with a spacer, which separates the two pieces of glass. Insulated glass is kind of a false term because glass is a horrible insulator. So it's kind of a marketing term saying insulated glass. If you've ever put a glass in the microwave to heat up water and grabbed it, you can tell it's not insulated. You can feel the heat real quick on it. So glass is not an insulator. What the insulation value in insulated glass is actually the airspace, that airspace between those two pieces of glass. So a lot of insulated glass, I'll use that term, or thermopane is another term, is just two pieces of glass with a metal spacer around it that's sealed together, so you're creating a dead airspace. There are items like argon that you can put in the glass to help the energy efficiency of it. Argon and those gases will eventually leak out. That seals good around the window, but eventually they dissipate over years, not right away. I don't know whether it's a year, 10 years, 5 years, they will dissipate. So there's some value up front, but then as time goes on, that glass goes. Insulated glass, just regular insulated glass, basically works off the dead airspace. Most insulated glass in a lot of, I should say not most, but a lot of insulated glass in windows is only a 1/2 inch thick. And that is two pieces of 1/8 inch glass with a spacer in it that's only a 1/4 inch. And then so you got a 1/4 inch of dead air between them. So it's not a lot of dead air. It's some dead air, but it's not a lot. As you start looking at some windows that are being made, they up that, they put two pieces of 1/8 inch glass within a 1/2 inch spacer. So now they have a 3/4 inch thick piece of glass, and now you got a 1/2 inch of dead air space. That doesn't really create, it helps, it helps a lot that there's a dead air space. And then as you get into bigger commercial windows, I mean, they start getting inch spacers, and the further you can get that glass apart, the more dead air space you create, the more insulating value, energy efficiency you'll have on a window. And what I'm doing is segueing into a storm window. A storm window or storm panel is either an inside, you can either get them for the inside, and I don't think I have any around here right now. But that sometimes people use inside interior storm windows, or the fancy name in the industry is secondary glazing. But it's really just, or else you see a lot of exterior storm windows. You probably have some nasty aluminum triple tracks on your house, which are falling apart and they're miserable. Those, if they're aluminum and they're not white or bronze or any other color, those probably are probably from the 70s, 60s, 50s. That's how old they are. If you start getting like a white storm window or bronze, those start coming in around probably the 80s up to today. Now they can get all different colors, but so you have really just plain old aluminum, those how old they are. Those guests are probably from the 50s or 60s or even the 70s. And they live past their life. A good aluminum storm window probably has a lifespan of 40 years. So you can tell that they're past their prime. So with storm windows, you're creating a dead air space. You're not going to create a complete dead air space, which is okay, but you're gonna create a slowed down airspace. So you have the cold weather hitting this, and it's going to move some of the air, but it's not going to move a lot of the air. So it's kind of creating a dead zone in there, keep your windows warm. The traditional storm windows were a wood. When they started coming up that we need some type of secondary glazing system, they did a traditional wood storm window. You might have those on your house, and they're fine as long as they have a pretty good seal around them. If they're not, if they're ill-fitting, they'll help a little from stopping air infiltration, but it's best to have a pretty good, well-fitting wood storm window. I don't have any traditional ones here. We have some sample. This is one that we make. It's actually a wood storm window. I know it's fancy mahogany. We don't make them in fancy. Well, we make them in the mahogany, but we don't put them on a house like that. It'd be a nightmare to maintain. This one looks like a traditional wood storm window. The only thing is, so people don't have to seasonally go pull their wood storm windows off and carry them down 2 stories and a ladder, and they weigh a ton, and then put the screen up. This one is created so it has a removable lower panel. So all I have to do is pop out the little tabs and pull out the storm panel. So you get the traditional look, and then you can put your screen in, all from the comfort of your interior and not have to worry about ladders. So you get the screen. You don't make them with panels on screens on both tops. The reason is most people don't use their upper window, which they should, but they don't. And to do that, we would have to have a real wide meeting rail. This is most people don't deal with the upper window. We kind of just do the lower panel. We can make them both ways, but it's just something that we don't do a lot of. And this will give you, on the outside of the window, traditional windstorm look. So if you want the it's traditional windstorm window, that's kind of like interchangeable. We call it interchangeable panel. Traditional is just some people want them. You pull them off in the spring, put your screens on, and then fall do that. Or else you can get the wood traditional ones with the arms that will push the window out. There's some hooks on the top, and it pushes it out this far. And that's what was, the way of getting around putting a screen up is having the window come out so far. We've built some of those, and some people, like the look of them, and they get enough air for them, so they're good with that. But storm windows will help quite a bit because you're creating a dead air space. You're also stopping air infiltration when the wind's hitting, going around any little openings in the window. Most of the time when you're feeling air infiltration from a weather strip window, it's often not the actual sash if it's weather stripped properly. It's getting in around the casing or brick mold, it's finding some way in. The weight pocket has no insulation in it. You can feel it at your pulleys and so forth. What we find is usually that's coming in through some, not the fault of the window, but cracks around the window somewhere. All right, so you have aluminum storm windows, you have, and there's some companies out there who make nice aluminum storm windows. One of them is, and we use them on historic buildings, Allied window, and there's another one, Monterey, and it's a low profile. It's the Allied work under the same system with removable panels. The Monterey's and a few other companies are really double tracks. They don't have the triples, they have a double track. So it's a window that's a little sleeker looking than your traditional old triple track window. And triple tracks are still available, all different price ranges. And the price range is usually reflected in the quality of the window. There's also an interior storm window, which I don't have any. Two different companies, Inner Glass makes one, which is a window that goes on the inside, is a compression fit. You put it on inside, and can't think of the other one. It's like a piece of plastic with a seal around it. Both work well. The problem with an interior storm window is it's not protecting your paint or any of your outside of the window. It's not doing any protection to it. So that's one problem. Two is you're still going to get some air leakage around your windows. I'm not going to say they're 100% airtight. And then you can end up getting condensation on your interior storm window, which then causes mildew and so forth to grow. So if it's not a problem if you take them off every season and take care of it. Long term, sometimes if somebody leaves it on forever, you'll start seeing, mold and mildew growth just because there's condensation and moisture. An exterior storm window I like better than an interior, but interiors are, does do the trick also. All right.
I got questions. We got about 10 minutes.
Okay.
You want a question?
Yep.
Okay, so I've had a couple of questions about this.
All right.
So when it comes to the cost of hiring somebody to repair or restore your window, when it comes to other projects on your house, if you're getting your roof done or something like that, there's a general knowledge of a roof your size should cost in this general range. What are some guidelines that you can give to help people as they navigate the field to hire someone to fix their windows?
Window restoration is not inexpensive. And I'm not going to say it's just not inexpensive. And the reason it's not is not because people restoring windows are wealthy and multimillionaires because they're getting so much money. It's very labor intensive, and it's kind of always interesting when I've had customers before who started restoring their own windows. They started working on them, and then they realize this is very labor intensive. I don't have the time. The nice thing is you don't have to restore all your windows at once. You can restore the troublemakers, a couple troublemakers, and get them back. But it's not inexpensive. Without giving out pricing of that, you could probably look for a 1/1. I'll say probably around $1,000
For a full restoration.
Full restoration, weather stripping, the different degrees of paint removal and upwards, depends on the window. Most of it's in labor because what the window restoration people have to do is it's not like we can just come into your house and rip out the window and leave with it and say, okay, that's great, but there's rain coming in. So a lot of what we have to do is, one, we have EPA regulations when we work in your house that we have to put plastic down, have to cover a lot of things. We have to do a lot of precautions for the lead. So a lot of the vinyl guys from out there replacing windows, they kind of cheat the system. And it's a way of doing it. They will put plastic on the inside of your window, and then they'll just come out and they'll cut the blind stop out. And then it's a horrible way to put the windows in. I'll say it, because when you if you were to put a replacement window in, you're supposed to do it from the inside and push it snugly against the blind stop and caulk it and do all that. But to avoid having to plastic up and go in the house, they do all that. They'll just plastic up the inside the window, and they'll get a saw and they'll just butcher this out with the saw, pull the windows out this way, and then they push the window in against the interior stop, which if the interior stop's not in the right position, they're kind of like trying to pull it and push it this way and make it happen. It's not the best way to put in a window. It's kind of the butchering way of putting in, but it's done because it's a cheap way. Getting to your pricing on window restoration, we have to do that. And then we also have to, once your windows come out, often we have to enclose it with plywood or plexiglass or whatever's available. So that's time, and also stripping the jamb. And you can put a lot of hours into one window. You just can't. If you start adding up you could be into 20-something hours into a window just to get it. We pull the pulleys, we end up, taking them out, cleaning, prodding all the hardware so it's all shiny and new. So it's not inexpensive. Sometimes, I don't know who's doing it right now, but your windows might just need some ropes retied, which is less expensive, much less expensive. You can find somebody who would do it, which there's a few more people who do it, because a lot of windows, that's all they need is the ropes need being retied. So if anyone wants to get into that business, there's a whole market out there.
We will train you.
We'll train you, there's a market. And they can go in and retire your windows and getting it operating again. They might not be able to get the upper sash going because that's taking out parting beads and breaking paint. But if you just want your lower sash, that can be done. Even in a workshop, we can show you how to get that done. Sash cord, you can get 100 feet for like $10 online. There's ways of weather stripping it, which aren't that expensive. So things that can be done on that type of thing. The upper sash, like I said, can get trickier. The lower sash is really relatively, easy. Without using that term, because then you're gonna try to get it out and find it's a nightmare. But you should be able to re-rope your lower sash, and it's we can do a training course on that, which we'll do. It's relatively simple to re-rope it, and then it'll work, and you save yourself lots of money. The interesting thing about window restoration, I'll say real quick about pricing though, is somebody restoring windows, if you have people out there, they may you can say, I only want 4 windows restored this year, the bedroom ones and so forth. They can come in and do that. When you call the window replacement company, whether it's Renewal by Anderson, whoever it is, they're not interested in 4 windows. They're interested in selling you the whole house full of windows. And I've had many of customers who say they'll spend 3 hours. They actually sat at somebody's house for 3 hours trying to get them to do a whole window. So next thing you can find yourself is signing a contract, you get 1 free window or something, but your contract's for like $50,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 to do all your windows. And if your budget allows it, that's fine. But if you're looking for a few windows just to work, you can restore just a couple at a time and get those working. But I'm not going to kid you, it's a very labor intensive business.
So you mentioned the sash cord, it's like $10-20 for a thing of it. If let's say your only issue with your window is that it's in good working order, but you want, because we are going to have a workshop price if you yourself want to fix your window.
If a homeowner's going to replace a window, glass at a glass hardware store, maybe $10, $20, maybe. I don't know.
Depending on the size.
I buy big sheets, 4x7 foot sheets, so I don't know. I get it, $2 a square foot, but you might pay 10. And the glazing putty, you're probably talking, if you want to put some time, you can glaze the window for $20, depending on the size of the glass. Bigger glass might be a little trickier, but $30 maybe, $30. You're not looking hundreds to replace it. And even if you don't want to get your sash out, take it to a glass shop, they'll do it probably for $20. I don't know. I haven't priced it out because I don't take my glass to glass shop, but it's not gonna be anything that's gonna break the bank probably. So there's that kind of item. So upper sash might be a little trickier, but often you see a lot of people, whether it's on the Facebook groups or whatever, they have a broken piece of glass and they're looking for somebody to fix it, but the glass shops don't want to come and take your window out. So if you can learn to take your own window out, you can take it to a glass shop, they can fix it, you can put it back in, you can put new ropes on. Probably for under $100 easily. I'd be surprised if it was more than that. So that's one of the things, and then we can cover, glazing. If you want to glaze your own windows, how to cut, glass, which is really not hard to do. We always, every workshop we've had or training, is like people can, then I show how to cut glass, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, cool. It's like you can cut round shapes, you can cut. It's like, wow, I didn't realize it was so easy. And the trick to cutting glass, if you're going to try it yourself, we have self-oiling. I don't know where it is here. Self-oiling cutters. We don't have one here. But even if you buy the cheap, inexpensive ones, the main problem with cutting glass, if you're going to try it yourself and you say, I'm going to try it, and you score it, and then you try to break it, and it breaks not even close to what you scored. The little wheel on the tool always has to keep moving. So the thing is, you want to have that little wheel lubricated. And whether you're using WD-40, olive oil, probably motor oil, anything, if that little wheel keeps turning, then you'll hear a scoring noise. If it's not turning, then you're not scoring it. So that's usually why glass does it. If you're trying it yourself and you break it the wrong way, it's because you scored it incorrectly. And it's all a matter of the little wheel turn.
And I think our last question, because we're right at 7:30,
Okay.
is a question about glazing
Mhm.
putty. So what is your recommended, and I know you have strong opinions on glazing putties. There's things that you use in your professional life and things that homeowners use.
It's kind of neat because glazing putty, you can go to the store at Home Depot, whatever, DAP 33 is a big popular one. And it's okay. I know there's a window restorer I know who's used it his whole career, and some people have, and it's okay putty. I'm not a big fan of it for certain reasons, but it'll work. It's available. But the nice thing about when I first was back in this, getting glazing putty was kind of difficult other than DAP 33, and there's companies out there. Well, now, because there's so many people restoring windows throughout the country, there's a company called Sarco, and you can actually get online and look up Sarco, and you'll want to type M is for like in a shop, and there's multi-glaze, which takes longer to skin over, which if you're doing on site, you're better off using multi-glaze. The thing about it now is if you get online, you'll see Amazon, everybody, you can buy little jugs of it online, order everything online, which really kind of opened up things tremendously of getting, most window restorers are using like Sarco. There's some out there, linseed oil, like Allback, which is fine. It's a little different of a product, and if you want to use it, it's fine. When you get it though, it's going to be solid as a rock, and you have to chop it up and heat it in your microwave. But you can buy small quantities of Sarco. So there's some window restorers who actually put it in freezer bags because it stays longer, and you can order a 5-pound freezer bag if you just need a little. I'd recommend if you're in a pinch and you want to use DAP 33 and you just want to get it done, Home Depot Value, True Value will have it. That's fine. I avoid staying away from the stuff that comes in a caulk tube. It's water-based. That's if you need a quick repair. But if you want to get a little adventurous, get online. You'll find this putty all day long online.
Right, because there is a difference between caulk and window putty.
Yes,
and glazing.
yes, yeah. Don't, other than the DAP 33, which comes in a tube, it's water-based, it looks like caulk. It works, but it's a little bit tricky. Like I said, if you're in a pinch and you just want it done and you want to put paint on it, because winter's coming in, you can paint it, the next day or that afternoon. That's a great repair type paint. Caulk, you don't want to use like any type of silicone caulk or anything like that. Stay away from any of those glazing, unless it's a real emergency and you got to get a piece of glass in there and you don't have time for ordering things online or you get to the store. That's kind of one of those quick stabilization emergency type repairs. I know somebody out there going to be working on the windows. They're getting all this leaking during the rain. They went out and used Flex Seal, and it stopped the rain, and it's a beautiful window, and it's they're getting water in the house, and it's coming, it's winter, and it's like I I can't blame them. I really can't. It's like, you know, any port in the storm, you know what I mean? It's like, and that's like, so I said, yeah, it works. It kept the rain out, and that's what they're, so a lot of those emergency situations you want to use that. But for anything like this, you know, I recommend glazing. So I don't know if we have any other questions.
No, there weren't any more questions. Let me check one more time. No questions. But we are up to time, so I want to respect Steve and your time. So thank you everyone for
Thank you very
coming.
much.
I again apologize for some of the technical issues. I hope that the recorded video might be a little bit better than what you guys are experiencing. We'll leave the room open just a little bit longer in case you guys are typing some questions, and Steve and I can respond to them in the chat box. But otherwise, we're done for tonight. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
You want to mute and turn off.